It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The top 5 things that happened while I was on vacation. The top 5 things that happened while I was on vacation. Number 5, issue 1 was disqualified from the ballot. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And now, this is a huge development. It's really just going to basically mean for certain that this is going to wind up in the Supreme Court. You had a Pulaski County Circuit judge last Thursday that ordered that no votes be counted for or against Issue 1 in November, in effect disqualifying the proposed constitutional amendment. Essentially, they're saying there's too many issues tied up in Issue 1. Issue 1 is the bad tort reform amendment that I have been railing against. We've been highlighting it's terrible. The Supreme Court obviously will wind up making the decision. I saw some polling yesterday. There are a lot of people who are against Issue 1, and it is a huge blemish, really, on the establishment, the Republican Party establishment that pushed this thing, that did the nursing homes bidding in the wake of bribes from Michael Morton to Mike Maggio. Mike Maggio's in jail for taking a bribe. He admitted to it. And then you have, of course, David Norsworthy sending Jake Files $80,000. He's in the nursing home business as well. And only in Arkansas would you go forward with the special interests after that. But a lot of people have no shame down there. Speaking of having no shame down there, number 4, John Woods and Randall Shelton were sentenced last week. That's number 4 on the list. Top 5 things that I missed. Here is Doug Thompson's piece. Springdale's Woods sentenced to 18 years in prison. Judge was amazed by the depravity of the heart. But what I would tell you is to go over to the Conduit News piece instead, because this is excellent reporting here. Headline, John Woods sentenced to 18-plus years in kickback scheme. It's very, very detailed, really, really good stuff. Some of Judge Brooks' ruling and statements. Listen to this. Judge Brooks condemned Woods at the end of the nearly 5-hour sentencing hearing. He said it was a violation of the public trust and was particularly and uniquely offensive. Brooks quoted the oath of office that John Woods took as a senator, then condemned him for breaching that oath. Brooks stated our republic was built on a very unique 3 co-equal branches of government and on a statewide system where you are one of 35 representing 3 million people. You violated the very fabric of that oath. Other notable quotes from Judge Brooks to John Woods: you stole from the very people that you asked for their vote. This was not an isolated incident. You became adept at it. I accepted face value. You at some point had good reasons and did good, meaningful, and legitimate legislative works. But then he said this: at some point you evolved mentally and thought, I can get juice from the wheels that grind government. Brooks compared John Woods' conduct to playing legislature chess to get around state Supreme Court rulings to keep GIF money flowing. Your top thought was how to get money in your pocket. Quote, you even lied about the little things like the bare bones form for financial disclosure. You developed an attitude that you're above the law. It's ironic that your top constituents were law enforcement at the same time you were stealing from them. Brooks claimed that Woods' crimes bastardized the process of state government. Brooks was extremely upset over the $400,000 Woods steered to alternative opportunities, now preferred family health care, for kickbacks. The money was later returned after being caught to the Planning and Development District. Brooks described Woods' immediate and reflexive response was to find a way to re-steal the money. He said this gave great insight into the depravity of John Woods' heart. Brooks said that Woods did not respect the law because he used his charm to mislead law enforcement while at the same time stealing from them. Brooks said that Woods' conduct showed his mentality had evolved to the point of serious criminal thinking, and Brooks had concerns he would plot and scheme again and needed a strong deterrent. That deterrent was 18-plus years, 220 months. It certainly is and according to my sources in Conduit News, he had no remorse, and that was one of the reasons that this happened. You also have Randall Shelton. Randall Shelton was very much remorseful, according to what I can tell. He got 6 years for his crime as a middleman. in this same scheme. Go to the Conduit News article here. Randall Shelton sentenced to 6 years in Ecclesia College kickback scheme. Excellent reporting over at conduitnews.com. And so you certainly want to check that out. Number three thing news story, the third biggest news story that I missed while I was on vacation is the fact that Tim Brooks, in the John Woods case, released hundreds of documents that were sealed that are now unsealed in the John Woods case. And this is a treasure trove that I still don't think we've gotten to the bottom of. Conduit News reporting on this as well, that the John Woods trial documents are now unsealed. This happened Friday afternoon, the Friday before Labor Day. Over 500 pages of documents. We know a couple of things. Number one, lots of text communications about Patsy Wooten. Patsy Wooten is the mother of State Representative Janet De La Rosa and executive director of Conservative Arkansas, a PAC that is not really conservative. At one point, a text mentions how Patsy was helping John Woods during the investigation and speculation about her possibly being charged in connection to the John Woods kickback bribery scheme. Discussion about John Woods and Patsy, quote, going on drives and getting away from phones and buildings because they believe the house is bugged. On Patsy Wooten, she was in the room when John talked and clearly knew all. That's the only place John, talked to him or take to him. Her house. If John needs to talk, it's understood that is where. Interesting situations there. Go read that up at conduitnews.com. Number two, former state representative Nate Bell was mentioned. Nate Bell just talked to me and said there is an ongoing FBI investigation about this one that we were discussing today. He said the governor targeted this money for a specific reason. I got the feeling the FBI talked with him. Now, that's a text message that was in these documents. Nate Bell was scheduled to actually testify at the John Woods trial. However, he was never called after discussion about his plans to issue a press release and hold a press conference ahead of his testimony. That was really, really strange. Number three, the procurement process. John Woods and Senator Bill Sample. Quote, there was a special language meeting today that busted up a monopoly that behavioral health had, where they had a monopoly and went around the procurement process. I wasn't there, but thought I'd get the details from Kevin Anderson. Woods voted against getting rid of it, as well as Senator Sample. I was told Senator Sample was vigorous in fighting against changing the process. It was about an $8 million deal. Number four, bargaining chip / private option. Quote, from Micah, these are text messages from Micah, tell Kenny that just because the law John passed didn't get funded, it wasn't a big deal. He was running for another term, and eventually the powers that be would need his vote, and that would be his bargaining chip, just like the private option and the money he got for behavioral health. This seems to show, by the way, a recorded pattern of deal-making to ensure the passage of Obamacare Medicaid expansion, previously called the private option and renamed Arkansas Works. There's going to be more to come from all this, but that certainly was a pretty big story, and it was the number three story that I missed while I was on vacation. Number two, drum roll please, the number two biggest story that I missed while I was on vacation is that Senator Jeremy Hutchinson was indicted. That's right. Senator Jeremy Hutchinson was indicted. Some people have said that he was kind of Al Capone because he wasn't indicted for the things a lot of people thought he was going to be indicted for. He was charged with wire fraud and tax fraud, campaign finance violations, according to the United States Attorney's Office. Counts 1 through 8 of the indictment charge Hutchinson with wire fraud related to falsified state campaign finance reports and soliciting campaign donors with fraudulent intent. Counts 9 through 12 charge Hutchinson with tax fraud for allegedly filing false tax returns from 2011 to 2014. With these charges, Hutchinson faces up to 20 years in prison for each of the wire fraud charges, a fine of up to $250,000 for false tax returns. He faces up to 3 years in prison, a fine of up to $100,000. The release stated that the indictment of Jeremy Hutchinson represents our commitment to vigorously investigate allegations of public corruption by elected officials. Senator Hutchinson allegedly diverted contributions from his Arkansas State Senate campaign to pay for an array of personal expenses. Now, what are those personal expenses? I'm sure we're going to find out a lot when this thing goes to trial. But this was huge. This is, the whiteboard still says waiting for justice. I still feel that way in terms of, Milton Rusty Cranford saying that he bribed Jeremy Hutchinson $500,000 over the course of several years. Who knows? I think that the practice of attorneys taking money and representing clients has got to end as legislators. So let me, that sounded like no attorneys should exist. Politicians who are attorneys cannot take money, for retainer to pass bills for them. That should be illegal, and I would hope the feds continue. Who knows? You know what? There could be another grand jury impaneled, and they could come back and they could charge Jeremy with something else, Senator Hutchinson with something else. So we're going to wait and see on that. Here's the Democrat Gazette story. Indicted on fraud charges, State Senator Jeremy Hutchinson resigns. That's the other thing that happened. He did, in fact, resign. He was the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and now he's resigned effective immediately. A federal grand jury indicted the lawmaker on 12 counts of wire and tax fraud. So he's going to fight. I understand there's a legal defense fund you can donate to for this, for Jeremy Hutchinson. Really? Oh, my goodness. So what would be the number one story, you might ask? What's the number one story? Well, honestly, it's related to number three. Number three was that you have Judge Brooks releasing over 500 pages of sealed documents from the John Woods public corruption trial. Number one is a result of those released documents. The number one story that happened, in my opinion, in light of all of the corruption that has taken place, that is in the headlines on a daily basis, is the fact that Senator Jim Hendren did not wear a wire or file an ethics complaint against John Woods after a bribe request from John Woods. This was, to me, astonishing. Couldn't believe it. Doug Thompson, back on September 4th, writing this piece that Arkansas senator says former state lawmaker sought bribe. Hendren rejected request tied to 2012 race, files show. So this is a good thing. I mean, it's good that Senator Hendren rejected the bribe request, but this is very interesting. According to these documents, John Woods wanted $10,000 to stay out of the way of Jim Hendren's 2012 Senate race in the event that redistricting would have placed the two Republicans in the same district. Okay? Now, it is Jim Hendren himself who has come out and admitted this because his name wasn't actually in the documents. That his name was redacted, but he went ahead and I think it would have been obvious, right? He went ahead and said, yeah, this was me. I'm the one who, I'm the one who's in these documents whose name has been redacted. Quote, this is a serious allegation which was purportedly made by Mr. Hendren 6 years ago to a number of people with connections to law enforcement, both state and federal, according to Patrick Benka, who is John Woods' attorney. Quote, nothing was done when the purported allegation was made, nor since. Mr. Woods denies the allegation. Mr. Woods is innocent and looks forward to his appeal before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay. So, of course, we now know he was sentenced to 18 years, John Woods was. So there's a meeting, according to these documents. There was a 2011 meeting where John Woods essentially said, hey, I'm sorry. Let me just read from this story here. Hendren went home after the 2011 meeting with John Woods, discussed the request with his wife, and then called a Benton County deputy prosecutor. The deputy discussed the matter with an FBI agent who told Hendren that a statement would not be enough to prosecute Woods. Hendren would need to draw Woods into another conversation about the offer while wearing a wire, according to the senator's account on Monday. This is what the Democrat Gazette reports Hendren is saying. Quote, "They didn't ask me to wear a wire," the Republican from Sulphur Springs said. "They asked me if I was willing to. I decided not to wear and push it, but to run my race." They asked me if I was willing to wear a wire. I decided not to wear a wire. Huh. Now, this is, by the way, the same Jim Hendren who is now championing ethics reform, trying to lead the parade, trying to say that legislators will tattle on themselves. Now, listen, I know he went to the prosecutors. I know that. But was there an ethics complaint filed? Did Senator Hendren go out of his way to find, I don't know, to support somebody? Let's say this. I mean, before John Woods decided not to run for re-election, it was clear John Woods was running for re-election, and Sharon Lloyd, Washington County Justice of the Peace, was running against John Woods. She was the conservative choice. She was for limited government. She wasn't the establishment, though. But see, Asa Hutchinson and Jim Hendren supported John Woods even though they knew he was a scoundrel, even though they knew that John Woods was corrupt. They supported John Woods anyway. Folks, that is a huge, huge story. And it shows you a ton of stuff. It shows you that these guys are determined. They want to call, Jim Hendren on Friday before I left for vacation. We played the audio where he, at the Benton County Republican Committee, he compared Conduit to terrorists. That we are like the Middle East nationals that the United States trains, and they put on their own uniform, but then they come in and they blow up, wear suicide vests or fire at their own people eventually. Yeah, he compared us to terrorists, okay? They are determined to oppose anyone who will not go along to get along with the Arkansas political marble palace establishment. And that is obvious here. That is obvious. That when it came time, I can't even call it party loyalty, really, because this is not what the Republican Party is supposed to be about. I mean, I know it often is because we're talking about corruptible human beings that make the wrong decision all the time, that are bent towards making the wrong decision. This is a big deal. Why didn't you wear a wire? Why wouldn't you want to nail this guy? This was back in 2011. There was still a lot of taxpayer money that could have been saved here that John Woods stole. I mean, my goodness. I bet you John Woods wishes that Hendren had have reported him, because he probably wouldn't be going to jail for 18 years at this point. Or I'm sorry, worn a wire. He did report, according to this story. They didn't ask me to wear a wire. They asked me if I was willing to, and I decided not to wear the wire. Why? And okay, fine. But then why did you and the gang, why were you guys gearing up to support John Woods before he resigned? Why? Why? Somebody tell me why. And it's because you guys thought nobody would ever find out about it. That's the reason. Now, the issue of credibility has got to be looked at here. Republicans, the issue of credibility has got to be looked at here. You've been there the whole time. You've essentially said nothing. You could have held a press conference. You could have filed an ethics complaint. You could have gone public with it. You could have pointed and said, but you know what? That you wouldn't do that, would you? Because, we've got to have party loyalty. I guess it is about party loyalty. You'd be looked at as somebody who's not a team player, right? You might be called, he's you're just angry. Doing the right thing, exposing the people who are corrupt. You're called angry. You're called not a team player. Senator Hendren, I'm sure he didn't want any of those labels. Those are the labels they reserve for people like Senator Brian King. We got to take